Daniel, nice to see you.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us. This is our first meeting of the school year for our Charter and Alternative Programs Committee. Nice to see so many of you who are out there doing the work with our students or virtually doing the work with our students. The purpose of this board committee is to review our charter renewals, and we'll go into that first thing in this meeting to see who's up this year, but then also to just check in on our alternative programs, internal and external. And today I hope to have a good conversation about how we're supporting our students in virtual learning in our alternative programs. So I guess we'll get started with public testimony. Kara, do we have anyone who's asked to provide public testimony today?
I did not receive any requests.
Okay. Anybody who is on with us who would like to make some public testimony before we head to the rest of our agenda? All right, then. We'll just look forward to a good conversation. Roseanne, did you hear anything from Michelle? No.
No. Not yet.
Okay. Then we'll just move on in our agenda. And Tara and Karina, I think this is you. We'll start with our charter school update and remind us of who is where in the renewal process and whether or not we have any new applications coming online. And we'll kind of rough out our schedule for the spring. Great.
Do we want to do introductions real quick?
Sure. You start, Director Bailey.
Bailey, board member.
Amy Constam, board member. Just start by the top row of Zoom.
So everybody's screen is a little bit different. On mine, I'm first, but I think that's true for everyone. So I'm Beth, and I'm the Opal School Administrator.
So Beth, why don't you tag somebody else who hasn't gone yet?
Okay, so I'm going to tag the person to my right on my screen, and that is Kathy Gaitan. Sorry for messing up your name.
How about Paula Halverson? You're on mute, Paula.
Hi, I'm Paula Halverson. I'm Karina's admin assistant.
And tag somebody, Paula.
Roseanne, I guess. I don't know.
Sorry, Paula. It's been a long time. Roseanne Powell, board manager, and I'm going to tag Stephanie.
Hi, Stephanie Walker, executive director of the Arthur Academies, and I will tag Jenny Braden.
Hi, Jenny Braden, Charter Schools admin assistant to Tara O'Neill. I'll tag Tara.
Hi, Tara O'Neill, the program director of the Charter Schools for Portland Public Schools. And I will tag Nathaniel Shu.
Hi, I'm Nathaniel. I'm student representative to the board and a senior at Jefferson. I'll tag, let's see, Kara.
Hi, I'm Kara Bradshaw. I'm the executive assistant for the board, and I will tag Lorna Fast Buffalo Horse.
Good morning, everybody. Lorna Fast Buffalo Horse. I'm the director of Multiple Pathways to Graduation, and I will tag Erica.
Hi, I'm Erica Stavis. I'm the program administrator for Contracted Alternative Schools, and I will tag Karina.
Hi, I'm Karina Wolf. I'm the area senior director for Multiple Pathways to Graduation, and I will tag Joe McFerrin.
Joe McFerrin, Portland OIC and the Rosemary Anderson High School. Good morning.
Good morning.
And please, somebody select. I can't.
So I think Shuka might be on the phone and hard to recognize. Is that you, Shuka? Nope, must be somebody else.
This is Tara Miller on this phone. Hi, this is Tara Miller. I'm with Portland Arthur Academy. Good morning.
Good morning.
How about Elise Huggins?
Good morning. Elise Huggins, Administrator overseeing Reconnection Services for Portland Public Schools.
Anybody else on the phone want to let us know who you are?
I think we still have to tag Jennifer Stackhouse as well.
Hi, I'm Jenny Stackhouse. I'm the Executive Director of the Portland Village School.
Michelle's joined us.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Michelle DePass, Portland School Board.
Anybody else on the phone want to jump in? Okay, so we will, Tara and Karina, I'll send it back to you and we can look at an overview of our charter school renewal and application consideration process coming up in 2021.
Great. Thank you. So I just want to, I actually just want to start, if it's okay, and just take a moment just to do a very quick land acknowledgement, if that's all right.
Absolutely, please do.
So I just want to start this morning and welcome all of you to our meeting, and just want to acknowledge the lands that we're meeting on today are from various locations of the area, that the land has been home since time immemorial to the Native nations of the Multnomah, Kalapuya, Chinook, Clackamas, Malala, Kaplemet, and Tualatin peoples. And Native peoples hunted deer and other animals, fished for salmon and other fish, gathered traditional roots and berries, traded, lived within traditional spiritual and governmental structures, and more, and still do. Smallpox and measles epidemics brought to this area by settlers, missionaries, and traders, disseminated up to 90% of the population in the early 19th century. Boarding schools, tribal termination, racism, and other aspects of colonialism have continued to negatively impact Native people since that time. We can't undo what was done, but we can honor and acknowledge the descendants of the original people of this land, those who have passed, as well as the land itself. As we gather today, we focus on building connection with and learning from our current Native students, families, and community. And with that, thank you. With that, I just want to welcome everybody this morning. Thank you for coming together. And Tara and I would love to talk about the charter schools. So we are in a really exciting year where we haven't been in a long time. We have 2 charter schools up for full renewal, and we have 0 charter schools with the annual 1-year renewal, which we used to do for a long time. Between the 5th and 10th year renewals, we would allow, either party would allow a 1-year extension. And we are now in the part where both of those schools are now at their 10-year. So Roseanne, were you going to share the slide deck?
I am so sorry. I wasn't prepared to do that.
No, that's fine. Then that's why I'm checking in. So I'll share the slide deck and then I'll turn it over to Tara and she can share about it. Tara, do you want to take it from here?
Sure. So as soon as I see and Karina, will you just as I finish the slide, then because I haven't done that.
Absolutely.
Do the equivalent of the push the button thing. That's great.
I would love to be your Vanna.
That was a lifelong dream of mine. Secrets come out. There you go. I have first wanted to acknowledge the question that Director Comstam asked about any new applications, and there were no new applications for charter schools for this particular year. We received a letter of intent for those schools by May 1st, which would have come by May 1st of this past year if there was going to be one, and then we received those applications by mid-July. So for this year, there are no applications. And I've also not been contacted by anyone at this point who is looking at starting a charter school in the following year. We will certainly keep everybody posted if we start seeing interest in that. So for this year, oh, here we are with a fabulous quote.
I love that quote.
That is great because that is exactly, that's just wonderful. I think we credit Karina with that quote, not saying it, but finding it.
I found it. I did not say it.
That is awesome. So there are 6 PPS sponsored charter schools. They are all K through 8. We don't have any charter high schools right now. So the K-5 schools are the Emerson School, Kairos PDX, Opal School, and Portland Arthur Academy. The K-8 schools are Le Monde French Immersion and Portland Village School. There are also 2 state-sponsored charter schools within PPS's boundaries. They are both K through 8, and that is Cottonwood School of Civics and Sciences and the Ivy School. And we do interact with those schools in a number of ways. The primary way from a contractual standpoint is with providing special education. But additionally, we also pass through the funds, and we are interacting more in terms of SIA funds and ESSER funds with the state charter schools this year as well. We also include them in all of our directors meetings so that they can learn information whether or not they're sponsored by the district, because they are serving PPS students. Next slide. So we have 2 full renewals, as Karina said, for this year, for Portland Arthur Academy and for Opal School. And for both of those schools, we've done multiple renewals with the schools in the past, and they have also completed a 5-year contract and an additional 5 years by doing the 1 year at a time extensions that I'm sure you're familiar with from having done those last year as well. So both schools are currently in their 10th year of the maximum allowed by law. So they are now going to be renewing for an additional contract. So the timeline for the renewal, we have to have 1 meeting by mid-January to set the schedule and understand how we're going to meet all the statutory timelines. So this meeting can suffice as that meeting. We just have to ensure that we have that set. And then there are 2 to 3 February meetings that are the committee. And then there is a full board meeting at which the vote on whether or not to renew will take place.
And I'll just say we broke it down just a little bit and have done a little work with, as we do every year, with Roseanne in the board office and Director Constam around when those might happen. So the next couple slides just break it down even further with regard to the current boards, to being mindful of the current board schedule.
And Tara, has there been any guidance out of the state that makes any modifications to the renewal process or the reporting process given a comprehensive distance learning?
None other than what is already guidance for full-on comprehensive distance learning for districts as well. So nothing specific to charter schools around the renewal process. Okay. So it looks like we have some specific weeks as well that you can see here, but we're hoping to set our time frame is set by statute for the most part, starting at the end of the contract year and working backwards. So statute will say within 180 days of the end of the contract is when we need to receive the application from the charter schools for renewal. So that is going to come to us on January 2nd. So that is when we will see what charter schools provide in terms of their application. And then from that point forward, we're also working on those same timelines. So the first week of February is when we hope to have the first meeting with the 2 charter schools to review their relevant data and look at the application for renewal. And that second to third week of February, the 8th through the 12th, is when we would plan, if we are able to, plan the possible public hearings. And that third week of February is when there would, if needed, would be a follow-up work session. That one is not statutory. That's at the discretion of the committee.
So here's some pieces that are for the committee. And then the next slide has pieces for the full board.
Thanks, Karina. Yes. So the full board meeting by statute is required to take place within 30 days after the public hearings are held. And the board meeting that falls within that time frame is the one on March 9th for holding the full vote. If for any reason that does not happen on March 9th, we can also move to March 23rd, which falls after that 30-day period, but we just need to have a mutual agreement documented between the charter schools and the district saying that's acceptable, and we can hold the vote on that date as well.
All right. Anything more you want to say about that process, or any questions from our friends at Arthur or Opal? I know you're all well familiar with this process, but. Okay.
So this is Beth, and I just want to say we're familiar with the process, but this will be my first time and my colleagues' first time going through a renewal. 10 years is a long time in the life of a school, or at least in a charter school, and so it is new to us.
Yeah. No, we look forward to that. We look forward to going through that process with you, and you know, it's very prescribed by the state in terms of our data review and all the metrics that you are beholden to meet, which you're well familiar with. So beyond metrics, we look forward to just getting a sense of what life is like for your school community and your individual students. And that's what I love about this process, is that each of our charter schools, and maybe in particular the two of you, have such different pedagogy, but historically have served your students so well. So it's always fun to get a look at how you do that and how different it is, but how it meets the needs of your kids. Anything else, Tara or Karina, that you want to say on that?
I'm good. I just, I think like everything else we're doing this year, it'll be really interesting to think about how we engage families and students in virtual or you know, in this setting that's safe, and really get a feel for each of the schools. So we will work hard to do that.
I also would add that you talked about the metrics that we generally look at, and of course, Oregon report cards look pretty different from last year, as well as not having SBAC data. And one of the things I think we have that's a plus for both of these schools is a long history. So we can also look at the past 9-year trends, because that's the last time they renewed, which is very helpful.
Yep.
Great. Yeah. Thank you.
I was on mute when I was trying to say one of the highlights of being on the committee last year were all the site visits.
Yeah.
And so it'll just be interesting to see how we negotiate that this year, because that's when it was so informative, both the formal and informal conversations, plus seeing classrooms. Again, I'd be interested in a virtual classroom visit if that would work. So I just wanted to open up that as a topic going forward.
I agree, Scott.
And I have a quick question, if I may. I'm curious, having not gone through the process before, what's entailed in the evaluation process? What are we looking for in terms of success? Are we looking at you know, test data? Just curious what the metrics are.
So we can, it's really often and I'll let Tara go into more detail, specific detail, but it's really kind of the three-legged stool of looking at, and you're exactly right, Director DePass, it's looking at the data and what are the data trends as far as student achievement and attendance, engagement, but really student achievement data, and looking at various student metrics, looking at the fiscal and the organizational management, So compliance with all of our state standards, as well as kind of business and operations, as well as hearing. The third part would be hearing from students and families and really getting a sense for their school community. And together, those three things really comprise the various parts of data that we will bring forward to the committee. Tara, do you want to add to that?
Sure. There's also very specific criteria in statute that are the only things that may be considered in the decision of whether or not to renew. Very clearly within that are all the things Karina just spoke about. So student achievement is a really big piece of it. An additional fiscal responsibility, proper management of financials, and then all the things around being a nonprofit organization, which is what each charter school is. So all the board requirements and responsibilities. So organizationally around all of that as well. So there are some specific things in statute. And I think the other side of that is there are many things that are not to be used for determining whether or not the school. So it's really just the things in statute. And I apologize, I don't have that list of things on this, but I will ensure that it gets sent. I'll make sure that I send that out to Roseanne to forward.
Yeah, thank you. That'd be really interesting. I wasn't sure how granular this assessment was. Was it, making sure that minutes were taken at every board meeting, etc.? So
that's a good idea. That sort of thing is
described.
That sort of thing is exactly what our annual review of the charter schools is. So we do a pretty granular annual review for each school every year around those exact things: board minutes, what's posted on the website, as well as student achievement, all of those things.
Thank you.
And I'll just say that each of the board and all interested parties, we have what has been a 3-ring binder or certainly a significant digital file that has each of the sections. So there are various sections that we go through, both with the annual review and with the full renewals. So there'll be a lot of information coming the way of the of yourself and the committee, school board directors on the committee. So we'll share a lot of that ahead of time, and then also in that process, really walking through that in January and February.
I have a general question. We had an enrollment update at our last board meeting this week, and I'm wondering, has our enrollment in our charter schools mirrored basically our enrollment in the district at large, which we've had about a 3.5% enrollment decline as a district, but it's been primarily at kindergarten and first grade. Have we seen anything different with our charter schools?
Our charter schools enrollment has pretty much stayed steady. For the 2 schools that are still growing up, it's actually gone up. I think there might be 1 or 2 schools that had a lower kindergarten entry, but their waiting lists are fairly robust. And so the kindergartens don't stay. If someone chooses not to come, there's a waiting list of people to come in. So in general, the charter school enrollment has gone up a small amount.
Got it.
And on a future slide, when we talk about the ESSER funding, there's a slide that has the enrollment per charter that everybody can see. Okay, I think this is the end of the conversation with regard to charter schools. Anything else on charter schools before you want me to move the slide forward?
I don't think so.
I just noticed that Joe McFerrin had a comment about helpful to have some level of focus for evaluating the schools on the achievement of Black students. And I did want to say also for charter school students, we do disaggregate the data so that we can look at student groups in terms of student achievement, as well as attendance and enrollment and everything else.
And that while it's not one of the prescribed areas of focus from the state process, we also have had a significant focus on what schools are doing to increase the diversity of their student populations.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thanks, Joe. Okay, Karina, can we talk about our RFP process and our opening our arms to our community-based programs, and just a conversation about how that landscape may or may not be changing this year?
Great, thank you. And thank you, Tara, for grabbing the questions in the chat because I can't see them with my screens. So thanks for doing that. So yeah, shifting gears, just doing kind of and this being the first meeting, I just wanted to kind of give the committee just a general overview of our alternative system. And again, we can go more in depth in future meetings as directed or as people would like, but just wanted to reference that we have within our district, we have MLC, Metropolitan Learning Center K-12, and then we have Alliance High School on 2 campuses currently. And then within our contracted alternative schools, we have 10 contracts, they're still there, but prior to COVID, on 16 different campuses. So I would just draw some attention to Helensview has a middle school and Rosemary Anderson has a middle school, and all the other schools are at the 9-12 or the 14 to 21-year-old at secondary. So that's our alternative system. And then I am going to invite Erica Stavis to join me and just share just a little bit. We're going to, again, stay pretty just high level, but we wanted to share with the committee just the major parts of work that Multiple Pathways has this year. And so in addition to the 2 full renewals for the charter schools, we also have an RFP coming up. So every 5 years, we are by statute, we go out for an RFP. Actually, it's not by statute, it's by practice at PPS, but it's best practice. So, so we go out, so we are due. So we're going to be in a cycle this year. The next RFP cycle will start July 1st, 2021 and run through June 30th, 2026. And our anticipated schedule, Erica, do you want to jump in?
I was just scared when you said 2026. That seems like a future date that is very far away. But yes, I'd be happy to jump in. So as Karina mentioned, we have our 5-year RFP coming up. And this process is, it touches a lot on many things that Tara mentioned. With all of our CBO programs, we have a pretty robust annual review process. And while it's not scripted by statute what that review process entails, I think PPS over the last several years has developed and refined a really great process for the review of our CBO programs. We currently actually have 9 contracts. One contract, Southeast Works, actually closed their education program just due to a variety of factors, not financially related, but just due to the fact that they had other programming that was becoming more robust, so they decided to change their focus. From my understanding, we have all 9 of our contracted alternative high schools that will be reapplying for this RFP, in addition to a few other organizations that have reached out to learn a little bit more about our process and who might be interested in applying. We anticipate rolling out, oh, sorry, go ahead, Amy.
Erica, do you know roughly how many students do we have in that high school population?
Probably this year?
Yeah, roughly.
Roughly 650, 700 students.
But it's early, but please remember it's early for us in the CBO world. And so oftentimes, and it'll be very interesting to see how this year is the same as past years or how this year is different from past years, in that we are right now, teachers submitted grades on Tuesday for those folks in the 4x4 for the first semester, and for people who were on for Cleveland and Lincoln who are still on quarters, it would have been the first quarter. And Alliance did their first 4x4, and MLC did as well. But so we often get more, our enrollment often goes up second semester. So it'll be curious to see how that grows. I would just say we have 2 contracts too with going from the 9 to the 10 just with PCC. So one of our PCC contracts, Yes to College, and one of our PCC contracts, Gateway to College. So those, and within our secondary menu, it's worth noting that we have high school diploma, and then we also have GED. And there's a couple slides in just a minute that'll talk about why we center who we center. But Erica, do you just want to go over the timeline?
Absolutely. And I did just want to add on before moving forward that for board members that are not familiar with that kind of enrollment timeline for CBOs and that kind of push in spring, oftentimes we'll see as close as 1,200 students being served by our CBO high school program. And we look at year to date versus a snapshot of enrollment, because oftentimes that doesn't give a full picture of the scale of students impacted by our contracted alternative schools. So we anticipate our RFP going out basically the first week back in January from winter holiday. And then we'll spend some time reviewing through February and March and ensuring that we do all of our interviews and other processes for asking questions of those that have applied and proposers. And then we intend to grant awards in late March, and then do contract negotiations through April and May. Of course, a copy of that contract is included, a sample contract is included in the RFP, and then services will begin July 1st. And it's important to note that many of our CBO programs run year-round, and so it's important to understand that approval of those contracts would need to happen before July 1st so that programs that do maintain programming throughout the summer are able to continue to work with students throughout those summer months. And if you'd like to,
I have a fundamental question. So do we have a set and rigid budget for our contracted alternative programs, or what are the parameters in this RFP process? Say we get a bunch of new applications. We have a set either budget or number of students that we are looking to serve?
So as you go through the RFP process, that can be flexible and determined by clearly determined by the district. So when we go through an RFP process, there's no set number of providers that we either accept or negotiate with or not. It's just who meets our cut score as we set those, and we're working, as you know, like hand in hand with our Department of Purchasing and Contracting and Procurement. So, so as we look at those, part of what contract negotiations will entail is that, as you all know, parallels the time or aligns somewhat to the time of the district budget process.
Right. So
we can have an RFP and people can be, it's a 5-year cycle. And so we encourage anyone who thinks, you know, I've gotten phone calls in the last couple of years as an example where people saying, oh, I'd like to start a school. And so it's like, this is the time. And so, so we encourage everyone who would be interested in the RFP. We want to make sure that the current providers already know that this is the schedule and that this is happening, but we want to make sure that we go public and we're very inclusive as far as wanting to encourage anyone who wants to apply. With regard to budget set by the superintendent in our budget process and approved by the board, as it is every year. With regard to how much we do or how varied we do contract negotiations from year to year, that's an internal decision. And so there's no, those are conversations within that you all can have as a board and certainly guided by the superintendent's recommendations.
Thank you.
So there's no hard and fast rules about that or limit on any side.
So are the contracts are multi-year?
They are, it's a 5-year RFP. So you would get a 5-year award. You'd get an award for this specific year with the potential to renew for the four following years.
Budget flexibility moving forward.
Yeah.
Up or down.
Yeah. And that's what we do every year, just like we've done the last 4 years as an example, is every April and May, we are waiting to see you know, what's our budget impact in multiple pathways, or what's our budget impact in the contracted alternative line item? And thankfully, we're very grateful that it has been either a hold steady or very minimal reductions, because the superintendent and the school board have prioritized these contracts, and we're very grateful for that.
And we're very grateful for the work you all do.
Well, and so this is really looking next. Thank you for that. We appreciate that. It's a great, you know, multiple pathways is great for a lot of reasons, but it's largely great because we have such great contracted school providers and community that we get to engage with all the time. And so that's what really, you know, it is that picture that was at the beginning is it's on the adults to figure out how do we reach and do right by our students. And so really looking at how do we tailor services to meet the specific needs of the students that need to be served. And so just following that, that thought is this is the focus area for our at promise students. So just a little education or information. The word at promise is really a national movement trying to really shift the word at risk and stop being deficit focused and really being strength based and have a growth mindset. And so we really think about who are our at promise students between the ages of the national definition is really more between the ages of 16 and 24, also called opportunity youth. So students who are disengaged or out of school and out of work. And so we're looking at who are those students, and the data that we have in our district around, this is not going to come as a surprise to probably anybody on the call or in the meeting, are the students that you see on this slide. So the students of color, unfortunately, our outcomes continue to be predictable by race, and our mission is to eliminate that. Looking at the number of students who are with identified disabilities, who are in need of alternative education, looking at our students, we have a growing need and we need to do a better job. And it's a continued area of growth for all of us, and certainly us in multiple pathways, in doing a better job with our students and doing an adequate and appropriate job with our multilingual students. And also one of the things that I'll just say, and I will always remind myself and others, is we often talk about our students with disabilities as we should. Often students also end up in alternative school because they're tagged. Mm-hmm. So we also want to look at the whole range of students that we have that are looking at being served in contracted alternative schools. So those that we have with regard, and a lot of these follow exactly the ORS that outlines alternative schools. So those students who struggle and have chronic attendance, significantly credit deficient, have significant learning gaps or gaps in education. We're looking at secondary students. So the RFP will be for both middle school and high school students, homeless students, and then geographic alignment with PPS with our at promise students. So really looking at one of the things that we did not have this last cycle, and many of you are aware of this, is we did not have any providers this current 5-year cycle that were located in downtown or on the west side. So really thinking about in the RFP we did 5 years ago, we really made a point to say we need more providers. We need to really look at the segmentation analysis of where our students are, and do we have enough the menu in Southeast or the menu in North and Northeast. And because of that, we grew certain things like specifically middle school services. So we'll be again looking at the data, working with our system planning and looking at the data around the kids that are disconnected or disengaged, and our reconnection services data. Who are those students and what categories do they fall into, and also what areas of town do they live in?
And then when you say you'll be looking at that data, so then does that mean that when we do look at that data, then we're going to actively try to solicit proposals from providers who can serve those needs, or that we may, ask some of our current providers to modify their scope somehow?
So I would say yes to both of those, and Erica can go into more detail, but one example is we reached out, and so all the things that you see on this slide, they will be things as we are drafting and the RFP currently, we're calling out the things that are currently on the slide that I just went over. So we're calling out the need for middle school providers. We're calling out the need for downtown or west side providers, and making sure that we make sure that our homeless students have an adequate, that our school choice includes the demographics of that aligns with the demographics of our students. Erica, anything you want to add to this?
No, I think you touched on many of the points, and just to kind of reiterate that we're working with system planning and performance to, review data as it relates to engagement during this kind of critical year where things are not clearly happening as they normally do. So we're continuing to kind of dig deeper into some more niche reports to try and figure out, and working in collaboration with Reconnection Services to really identify who are the students in need of alternative school services, where are they located, and what services. And some of the slides that we just included here on the slideshow. So this was data that was pulled early October, and this shows the percentage of students 19 years old or over. And this shows a comparison between our comprehensive high schools, our CBO schools, and in-district alternative schools. And so as you can see, and the numbers are kind of low. So comprehensive high schools, only 1% of their students are 19 plus. CBO student population is 19 plus, and our in-district alternative 17 plus. And as you can imagine, most of these students not only are overage, but also credit deficient and or have severe or chronic attendance, issues. Additionally, percentage of students with disabilities, as you can see, our CBOs and in-district alternative schools continue to serve a very high concentration of students with disabilities compared, at least percentage-wise, to our comprehensive high schools. The number and scale, of course, larger at the comprehensive high schools because there are so many more students. But the percentages, I think, are important to point out so that we can really get a picture of who our CBO schools are serving and how we need these programs to support these students.
Karina, I just, while there's a break in the conversation, want to give an appreciation for using the term at promise rather than at risk. And I think our language really matters, and labeling, how we label kids, matters. So I'm really happy to see that shift to using language that's more positive and hopeful.
Thank you. I will say a year ago, no one's going this year, but a year ago, and it's happening virtually, but at a conference that we often go onto, our Alternative Accountability Policy Forum is a national conference, and a variety of us, multiple folks from multiple pathways went, as well as our colleagues from PCC and Mr. McFerrin from Rosemary Anderson and others. And we were all really impressed, and Lorna Fast Buffalo Horse from MPG also. And we were all really impressed that the state of California made the decision that they were going to take the word at risk out of all. They worked for about 18 months, and they were going to take the word at risk out of all out of all their law language and change it all to at promise. And the governor signed that into law about a year ago. And so in the state of California, they have made this switch to, you won't see at risk in their verbiage anymore. Everything is at promise. And so it was really inspiring. And so we hope to do the same in Oregon.
Thank you.
That's great. And I like it too, because it implies reciprocity, that we have a promise to them as well, for them to realize their promise.
Oh, well put, Amy.
And we are happy to, I'm just mindful of the time that we have about 15 minutes left. And so we are happy to provide more information and more specific information with regard to the CBO RFP at future meetings. I also just want to send out an apology to the CBO leaders specifically, but to CBOs and charters, in that there wasn't a whole lot of notice between the time where we set this meeting and where we had this. So I'm sure that there will be a variety of people that might be interested in describing or wanting wanting to hear your requests from the committee around how we can do deeper dives into anything you'd like to know about the ALT system in future meetings.
Sounds good. Beth, did you have something?
Yeah, I wanted to bring forward some language that Kairos PDX has shared with the charter committee group, and that is that they talk about investing in their children. So they're not looking for contributions or other language that we've used. They talk about investment, and I think that that's also a really powerful way to think about it.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So the next topic is just responding. Director Constam, you had asked us to share some information around just funding distribution, kind of in the during this year in the age of COVID, and so I just wanted to add a couple slides, and Tara can chime in and Erica can chime in as you'd like. We just have on this first slide, it just talks about the columns on the top are the private schools, the CBOs, and the district charters, and the state charters, and then the DART schools, the long-term care and treatment. And the reason I'll just share that this topic came up is because there was a question around ESSER funding, and so we wanted to share transparently with the board where we are, and that's also one of the reasons that Kathy Gaitan has joined us, thankfully, is if there are specific questions around ESSER funding or around SIA allocations, questions like that.
And my high altitude question here is just, we had a great opportunity to make these investments through the ESSER funding, and then I think we have a parallel conversation about our student investment account funding. And I just didn't have a sense of whether we are also making these investments in our internal and alternative programs and in our community-based organizations. So I'll let you, Karina, give me your response to that, but I'd also love to hear from those of you who are out there wrangling your own schools' budgets, and let us know how you felt like you interacted with this sort of supplemental investment budget process.
So to start us off, Tara, do you kind of want to go over, do an overview for the charters, and then Erica can do one for the CBOs, and I'll quickly move to there's about 3 slides with figures on them, but this one has an overview.
Sure, absolutely. So with the district charter schools, which is about, I'm going to say 1,400 to 1,500 students, probably around 1,450.
It's 1,471, I think.
Oh, thank you.
1,474.
And the state charter schools are running just a little over 500 students. So that's kind of letting you know total between the district and the state schools, there's about 2,000 students. So for district charter schools, as we've known, district charter schools are participating in the district's equity allocation funding for those schools that qualify. So if they have a student population that combined historically underserved or direct certification meets the standards of the district to participate in equity allocation funding, then they will receive some of that equity allocation funding. And right now, what we have is an estimate. So we have a few schools that are sometimes on the bubble of qualifying. So we won't know until January when the census is done specifically which schools are going to qualify. So this is an estimate of what we think schools will be receiving. And we really won't have an answer for sure, but all the charter schools are eligible if they qualify for that funding. Back to the previous slide on the SIA funding, all the charter schools also had to complete an SIA plan and prepare a budget, and the charter schools office maintains all of that information, and they will be receiving the SIA funds at the same percentage as the district is receiving. I will also say that Kairos qualified to apply for the SIA funds independently, so the district won't be passing through those funds, but they will be receiving SIA funds. The 2 state-sponsored charter schools will also receive SIA funds, but the law did not provide a process for that, so the district will be serving just as the pass-through for their funding, but the state office will continue to monitor their spending and all of the eligibility requirements for those SIA funds. Where it gets into a little confusion is with the ESSER funds for the charter schools. The district-sponsored charter schools are not eligible to receive any of those funds because of the change over in how those ESSER funds could be applied. They are not being shared with the district-run charter schools, but because the state was able to do a set-aside for the state-run charter schools, the 2 state charter schools in the district will be receiving the ESSER funds. So again, the state doesn't have a procedure for distributing those, so the district is also going to be distributing those funds through to the state charter schools as the financial conduit. The state will again oversee all of the spending and eligibility, et cetera.
And can you go back to why our own charter schools are not eligible? Is that because of the way our district chose to read the federal statute or the federal guidelines around the ESSER funds and declared that charters were not eligible?
It was because of the choice that we were given around Title I schools, sharing the funds only with Title I schools, or sharing the funds differently that would include the private schools differently, students attending private schools differently. At that time, it was the guidance that had been put in place by the Secretary of Education, U.S. Secretary of Education, that sort of changed all the rules.
Right, and that was recently modified. And so charter schools fall under the same umbrella with all of the other private schools there.
They do not fall under the umbrella, but they are not Title I schools.
And I would just say, is there anything, Kathy, that you want to add?
I'm sorry, I was like everybody doing 3 things at once. Could you repeat the question? Sorry.
That's okay. So just talking about charter schools and private schools and CBOs and ESSER funds.
Mm-hmm. So we finally resolved the situation with our illustrious Secretary of Education. So we were finally, ODE finally gave us the okay to distribute the funds with the formula. So I was able this week to notify all of the private schools, which do include several CBOs, who will be getting some of this, of the ESSER and GEAR funds. And I will move forward. Again, the funds are available through next summer, and schools have a lot of liberty as to how they can use them. And I'm going to be meeting with all of them. I have to have a consultation with all of them, again, to develop a plan and move forward with what they're going to do with the funds. Normally, what I'm seeing are schools wanting to spend them on some cleaning supplies and those kind of COVID related expenses to the building. And also software and things, professional development for distance learning.
So, thank you for the reminder. So, Kathy, do you know what ESSER stands for? So what I know is that ESSER is federal, just for the audience, that ESSER is federal funds allocated federally for really to help schools with regard to COVID and the expenses that are accrued as a result of COVID.
I think it's elementary and secondary school emergency relief.
It was under the CARES Act, and although I'm not, I can't predict the future, it seems very likely that Congress will have to write another law and provide more support for schools moving forward so they can open and for this next year. Hopefully they will have more guidance around the equitable share of funds, because that's where we got into this pickle with Betsy DeVos. So
yeah, and there may be some ways that the state could be more helpful in issuing guidance around our own distribution, regardless of tangling with the definitions put forward by the feds. So I would just encourage all of you, wonderful administrative team here, to connect with Courtney Wessling in Government Affairs on this issue and what some of the implementation glitches may be. Because I think you're right, we're going to see another federal relief package, and we want to make sure that it gets to all of our students who need it.
I'm glad I wasn't the only one who had to Google ESSER. So can somebody help me out with GEER? G-E-E-R. Going once, going twice.
So I was waiting for Kathy to jump in, and Kathy, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, which clearly we are putting you on the spot. But
GEER, can I just say GEER is Government Emergency Education Relief Fund. So put that in your
Well, just leave it there.
So my understanding, Director Bailey, is that there's 3 within CDL. The state had 3 specific grants. And so CDL was one of them, or CDL was the compilation of 3 of them, but the GEER grant was the specific one where just a small amount, $6,209, went to the private schools and CBOs, and other private schools within PPS. So I think one of the reasons that we just wanted to share this is because of exactly what's getting raised, that there are various funding streams and it can be very confusing. But it is really unfortunate that the district charter schools are not receiving ESSER funds at this time. And they have made that, Director Constam, you asked about what are schools saying, or people out in the field, what are you thinking? And I would just be remiss if I didn't reflect back that our district charter schools have requested and wondering around how can they also get some support for the additional expenses with regard to, CDL and the operations for this year.
And just so I'm clear, this is a decision that rests with our district. And I know that there was a modification to the language at the federal level around the private school, availability of the funds for private schools. But am I correct that our district could change our interpretation there and not have it be an either or between our Title I schools and our charter schools, but just have it be a bigger tent?
Tara, do you want to respond to that?
Well, I think I might need to ask Kathy specifically. My understanding is that initially there was not a choice, and after the reinterpretation, now we're in a position where there might be a choice, but I don't know.
So this would be a question for Leslie. I'm just the receiver of the fund, so I'm not in a position to see what they're doing. I get what I get. So that would be, again, a question for her.
Before we move on, I'd like to ask a quick, Beth, I know you had something that you wanted to say too, but I want to ask a quick question. So if our CBOs are eligible, Joe, if you're still on here, can you just tell me what that allocation was, say, for Rosemary Anderson, so I have an understanding of the order of magnitude here?
I'm sorry, but I'm not sure what our allocation is.
Speaking of putting people on the spot.
I'll say that this was a very touch and go type situation for a while. And so we just received notification on Tuesday, and Kathy has been reaching out to schools. And because of the middle school being Title I eligible, that's the only school within POIC that actually meets the eligibility for criteria. And Kathy Gaitan, if you want to kind of clarify where we're at with that, that might be useful.
Or we can, maybe if you guys can follow up by email.
Yeah.
Okay, so there Tara says $1.40 per ADMW. I mean 140. So that's not nothing. Okay. Thank you.
And it would be helpful for me to hear what the expenses are that are COVID related. I know you mentioned a couple of categories like professional development and the whole distance learning software kind of piece. And also, if and when we get to a reopening, what kind of expenses you might anticipate there. Just, just broadly ballpark how you see that coming up. And that's both for charters and alternatives.
Yeah, what your unreimbursed COVID-related expenses are.
Well, I can jump in there just to add the things that we're thinking about, that we're trying to prepare for as we reopen. We're talking about moving walls to create more space. We're talking about having staff, additional staff to do cleaning. We're thinking about thermometers, these electronic thermometers, so that you can always check temperature. And then the big one, ventilation. So we're getting quotes on our building at North, and we're looking at $20,000 per unit to get up to snuff, so that we can have the kind of air circulation that we can feel really good about. But we've also identified some standalone units that we can place that are about $500 a piece to help with air circulation and ventilation. So significant cost.
Just, you might want to remember too that using federal funds for structural things is not going to be allowed.
We're we're very well versed in.
Yeah, I mean, there are other pots.
Yeah, we've been doing this for a while. So okay.
Thanks, Joe. That's helpful.
Yeah.
And again, we face many of the issues in our old, funky, regular school buildings.
So I just want to, as we close, and there's just one, I just wanted to, I know it's time, but I just wanted to, we can table it also, but people had asked around just attendance and reconnection services in this moment. And so I just had a slide or two just to give an update about that. But I just want to close the funding piece with, this has been a year unlike any other. And so there's been a lot of kind of hurry up and then wait, because in part the federal government has changed things and ODE has changed things. And so one of the things that we are really clear about is we do want to be mindful, and I think we can continue to bring information to this committee, but around the impact. So thank you for asking the question, Director Constam, around the impacts on smaller organizations with these various funding streams. One of the things I will say that we have prioritized for all of our PPS students, including our CBOs and our charter schools, are Chromebooks and hotspots. And so we continue to try to look at what are some of the ways that we as a district can just be more inclusive in our work going forward. But it's very, as you can see and hear, it's complicated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can I, this is Beth, and I'm wondering if I can chime in. The Chromebooks for our students has been a huge boost. So I want to say thank you many times over. We probably have between 40 and 50% of our students who have taken advantage of getting a Chromebook from the district, and I don't know how we would possibly have provided that through our budget. So I just want to really acknowledge that. A group of charter directors did send a letter with some ideas about outside of the standard ESSER funding, how the district might be able to provide some amount of funding to support the expenses. So for us, one of the big ones was upgrading teacher laptops so that they could actually work remotely. Because I don't know about the other charter schools, but many of our computers are 10 years old and desktops and not able to move. And so there was a pretty significant investment in just getting technology to teachers so that they could do their job. And that's already happened. And then Joe talked about ventilation. It's a big deal, trying to keep things safe for everyone who's working on site, and then all of the cleaning efforts and the sanitizing and the labor and the costs and the masks and all of that. And in our letter, one of the things that we said, we tried to give sort of a menu of ways to support us, including things like, just let us know who your approved vendors are, because every one of us, you know, we have a teeny tiny staff and we're out trying to figure out, you know, which are the counterfeit masks from China and which are the ones that we can use that are going to protect us. So there's a lot of different ways that I think the district can support us, that some of them are monetary or allocations from the warehouse, lots of different ways. So we encourage you to think about what that looks like. The ESSER funds are, you know, something around 2% of the state school fund. And we recognize that we've benefited from Chromebooks and other things. So thank you, and still a request.
Great. We have been slowly but surely, in a lot of systemic ways, trying to make sure that you are all part of the family. So
yes, and we feel that. We feel a shift over,
but still working on it. Joe, you had you wanted to raise something maybe for a future meeting about student safety. I'd like to hear about that. And then I want to move on to just talk about where our kids are with virtual learning.
Yes, so thank you, and I join Beth in our appreciation. One of the things that keeps me up late at night is thinking about the community violence that we've been experiencing over the past several months and how that will affect reopening. And so I would like to not to scare anybody. So this is not, I think we have an opportunity to have a coordinated effort to address this before it gets to a level that we all don't want to be a part of, right? So if we can, and maybe this isn't the right group, but I just wanted to put that out there, that there are concerns about what's going on in the community in terms of violence, and then how we're going to deal with that, address that in a proactive way as we reopen schools sometime in the future.
So what can we do as a school system to keep our students and families safe?
Right. That's that's what I'd like to. I think it's, your question is a really good one, and I think now is the time to start having those conversations in anticipation of reopening.
All right, let's think about that and talk about that. And I want to say to you, Joe, that I know your school community has had some losses and a lot of pain in the last few months. And I know you're a really tight community. And I also know that so many of your families look to your leadership and the leadership and friendship and love of your staff. And I'm just really sorry. And anytime we lose one of our students or one of our graduates, it hurts all of us. And I'm so sorry, and just want to send love and condolences to your whole school community.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you raising that topic too, Joe. And that's a fantastic, unfortunate, but incredibly real topic that we need to continue to address. We have had experienced violence in our the families in our charter schools, our CBOs, and our in-district alternatives. There's been a lot. There's been, as everybody knows, just a great deal of loss. So that is absolutely a really important topic for us to continue to think about. And maybe that's in part a shift or a pivot to our very last topic that we can just say very quickly, is that we're really trying to do some work with regard to how are we making sure that our students feel seen and loved and have a sense of belonging at school. And so I just invite Lorna quickly to just kind of share a little bit about what we're doing with regard to our outreach during this time.
Thank you, Karina. So Reconnection Services continues to work in Portland Public Schools for students who are out of school or disconnecting from school, finding those students and referring them to school. It is a caseworker or a case management approach. And so part of the process is really working with the student and their family members and gaining the trust with them so that issues like student safety can be considered in where to refer a student to re-engage with school. Our Reconnection Services office also works closely with the student attendance coaches, which are Measure 98 funded positions in all of the PPS high schools, and really working under a change in the ODE process that that doesn't trigger a drop of a student from a school in the same way. So trying to really adapt and really figure out, are these students kind of lagging in their attendance, for example, at a comprehensive high school, and we just need to coordinate, collaborate, and get them back on track? Or are these students who have disengaged and we need to talk about another option in the CBOs or the in-district alternative schools or some other place? So that work is continuing. It is highly coordinated with student intervention teams and other aspects in all of the PPS schools, and, including the CBO schools.
Lorna, would you say are we seeing generally that it is harder to keep kids engaged and connected to school, whatever that school may be, in virtual learning?
Yeah, I think it's a huge challenge. I think there are a few exceptions out there of students who, whose anxiety may have prevented them from good attendance, who are adapting quite well to distance learning, but so many of our students are really struggling with, not being able to go to school with the, I know from my time when I was at Alliance, how many students used our food pantry. The district, it does have nutrition hub sites, but it's a different process when it's not at your own school in all cases. So access to food, access to kind of mental health support, access to tutoring, instruction, all of those are have to be sort of repurposed for how we get those to students. And it's definitely a struggle. And then the state has changed the rules around dropping students, which is great. We don't want students to be dropped because they're having connectivity issues or other things like that. So it has raised a challenge for Reconnection Services about how we identify those students, and really required all of us to get better at how we communicate with each other about our students.
I think we're going to learn a lot more, as Karina was remarking earlier, after we, pass the first grading the first term, the first semester. So keep us posted about just what this looks like in terms of how many students are feeling disconnected, and then what we can do and what we are doing about it.
Absolutely.
Can I just pop in here for quickly? Since I have a forum, one of the other programs I oversee is the McKinney-Vento program, serving our homeless population. And we have found that our numbers of identification have dropped significantly this year as compared to last year. We're about half what we would normally identify. We're not alone. Our East County colleagues say the same thing, and we've heard that California is in a similar situation. We attribute it partly to the moratorium on eviction, so it's people are able to stay in their houses or where they're at for a little longer and haven't been displaced. But the reckoning ball will be coming, we fear. Also, we're seeing that some families are just basically falling out. The connection between school and family is just really broken. Plus, we're thinking too, even though we have continually reached out to schools, secretaries aren't seeing families in person, their living situations may not become apparent. So anyway, just a reminder for all of the school administrators out there, if you can make sure to double check that your families are housed, and if they need assistance to please contact their liaison. There's the online referral that you can submit, and we're doing our best, but we need support from schools.
I'm really glad you chimed in there, Kathy. That was you, Kathy, right?
Yeah.
I have asked for more conversation around our services to our homeless students in our board meetings. So that's going to be coming up, and hopefully we'll get a report on that. And just, what we have said all the way along with every aspect of remote learning is that we're going to be reviewing and recalibrating and, not taking anything for granted in terms of how we're delivering services to our students. So want to get a sense of what we're doing. Is it working? Who's not being served? What do we need to do differently? Do we need to revisit our resource allocations? But it's heartbreaking to hear you say the connection between school and family is broken. We all know that is true in some fundamental ways, but it's on us to figure out how to repair that as best we can in these very bizarre circumstances.
Well, if I can say also too, we've been very fortunate to receive some funds from Jonathan Garcia, and one pot of money was from the CARES Act and the other one was from donations. So we've been able to use some for rental relief. That's been very helpful. Also, I oversee the migrant education program, and we have done some utility payments for some families, a lot, which has been helpful. And we're also using funds for tutoring for both migrant and McKinney-Vento students. So all have been families are seeing our support, but I worry that once the eviction moratorium ends, these families are, they're just hanging by a thread, and it's quite really sad to see the utility bills that I'm approving payment for. It's just so, and some have already gone to collection agencies, and that puts a burden also on our staff, because then trying to pay these things gets very complicated because you're not the person who's getting it. It's just super, super sad. So I really appreciate the funds that we've gotten. I'm hopeful that we can get some more, because it really does impact our families and students. It's obviously very hard to concentrate on school when your family is in disarray.
Yeah,
I've heard some utilities around the state are doing shutdowns. Not in Portland yet, but it's just blows me away.
And it never hurts to remind everybody that we as a country have got to get on board with looking at internet connectivity as a utility. This is just pathetic.
Yeah.
And we're fortunate to be in Portland, but if you're in Eastern Oregon with my colleagues in Migrant, I mean, there's no connectivity out there. There's huge spots. So, you know, we have our problems in trying to make sure we have hotspots and things, but at least you're going to connect to something.
Yeah. Thank you. Karina, did you have anything else you want to wrap up?
No, I think this, I appreciate the time of the committee today, and I appreciate everybody who has participated and given feedback. I think it all just the last conversation just brings us to the kind of the last thing on this slide, which is we're really centered at making sure that people are okay and that our students are okay and our families are okay. So our focus is really engagement first, and then enrollment, and then attendance. And you're going to see, we know that our data is going to reflect that because so many of our students and families are struggling. So, so we're just going to be mindful of that. So that's all we had today.
Okay, I just want to say too to our everybody who joined us today, if there are other issues that you want to bring forward, or when you're talking to your colleagues who aren't on this call today, that they want to bring forward, please reach out to me and or Karina or Roseanne, and let's broaden the conversation. Just let us know what we need to be paying attention to. Okay. Everybody take care. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.